My teacher gave me an F because I wrote too well, but I had the last laugh. Mrs. Chen slammed my essay down on my desk with a giant red F scrawled across the top. The entire class turned to stare as she announced loudly, "This is clearly AI-generated, Marcus. No sophomore writes like this." My stomach dropped. I'd poured my heart into that 5-page essay about my dad's deployment to Afghanistan. Every single word came from our late-night video calls, his handwritten letters that I kept in a shoebox, and my own raw memories of missing him during holidays and birthdays. "Mrs. Chen, this is about my father," I said quietly, trying not to let my voice crack. "He's been deployed overseas for 8 months. These are real stories he told me." She crossed her arms and rolled her eyes dramatically. "Oh, please, Marcus. Anyone can make up a convenient sob story to cover their tracks. This prose is far too mature, too polished, too sophisticated for someone your age. You obviously use ChatGPT or some other AI tool." The humiliation was crushing. 28 pairs of eyes were staring at me like I was some kind of cheater. My best friend Jake looked away in embarrassment. Sarah, who I'd had a crush on since 7th grade, actually shook her head in disappointment. "I can prove this is real," I stammered, pulling out my phone. "I have all his letters, photos from—" "Put that away!" Mrs. Chen snapped. "Save the performance for drama class. You're getting a 0 for academic dishonesty, and I'm reporting this to the administration." That night, I sat in my room staring at the crumpled essay, fighting back tears. When my dad called for our weekly check-in from his base in Kandahar, I almost didn't want to tell him, but something in my voice must have given it away. "What's wrong, son? You sound upset." I explained everything. How I'd written about his stories of helping Afghan children, about the time he shared his MREs with a starving family, about how proud I was of his service, how Mrs. Chen had humiliated me in front of everyone. The line went quiet for what felt like forever. When Dad finally spoke, his voice had that cold, commanding tone I rarely heard. "Marcus, I need you to send me her email address, right now." "Dad, you don't have to." "Son, send me the email. That's an order." The next morning, I walked into English class dreading another day of whispers and suspicious looks. But something was different. Mrs. Chen kept glancing at her computer screen with this weird expression, like she'd seen a ghost. Around 10 minutes into class, she suddenly went completely white and started reading something very carefully. Her hands were actually shaking. She looked up at me with wide eyes. "Marcus, can you stay after class, please?" When the bell rang and everyone filed out, she closed the door and turned to face me. Her entire demeanor had changed from smug confidence to nervous panic. I received an email this morning," she began hesitantly, "from your father." She turned her laptop screen toward me, and I couldn't believe what I was seeing. There was an official U.S. Army letterhead at the top, with my dad's full name and rank clearly displayed. "Colonel Marcus Thompson Sr., 82nd Airborne Division." The email was professional but devastating. In formal military language, my dad had explained that he'd been helping me develop my writing skills since I was 7 years old, sharing stories from his 3 combat deployments, teaching me about sacrifice, honor, and service to country. He mentioned his own credentials: West Point graduate, master's degree in literature from Georgetown, published articles in military journals. He politely but firmly suggested that perhaps Mrs. Chen might want to reconsider her assessment of my capabilities. But here's the part that made my jaw drop. He had CC'd the email to Principal Rodriguez, Superintendent Williams, and every single member of the school board. The subject line read, "Regarding false accusations against my son." Mrs. Chen's voice was barely a whisper. "Marcus, I had no idea your father was— I didn't realize he was such a high-ranking officer." The next day was even better. Mrs. Chen had to stand in front of our entire class and publicly apologize to me. Her voice was shaking as she announced that she was changing my grade to an A+ and that she had made an error in judgment. But the absolute best part came 2 weeks later, when Principal Rodriguez announced over the intercom that Colonel Thompson would be speaking to our school about military service when he returned from deployment. Mrs. Chen actually asked me if I thought my dad would be willing to write a recommendation letter for her graduate school application. I just smiled and said, "I'll ask him, but you should probably work on not accusing students of cheating first. Sometimes having a badass military dad who doesn't mess around really pays off."